Now, I am very heartbroken over what's happened in Texas. And it's shameful to me that somebody would basically, with their prejudice, say that because I happen to belong to a party that I don't care. That's appalling. But I think gun bills don't solve the problem. Chicago shows us that. And where's the up in arms when we've got children dying in the streets and in the homes from random shots in Chicago every single week? They've got more gun control than any place.
This is Arizona State Senator Rick Gray, arguing against any kind of legislation regarding guns. In this case, they're specifically talking about assault weapons. So he turned to whataboutism, changing the subject to handguns and referring to why Illinois laws don't protect Chicago against guns brought in illegally from Wisconsin, Iowa, Missouri, Kentucky, or Indiana. But that's not even what we're talking about.
But what we don't see, and I think what we're trying to do is put a Band-Aid over skin cancer. The real core issue, and I'll be honest, this may be my bias, but this is how I see it. For decades, we've been teaching our children in school there is no God. Can't pray. You can't even pray on the field. There is no God.
That's right. Rather than even consider raising the age limit to buy an assault rifle or doing anything at all, Senator Gray is instead blaming atheism for mass shootings in public schools. Do I even need to say that he's Republican? You already knew that when you heard how stupid his position is. And like many on the religious right, or should I say religious wrong, Senator Gray doesn't understand the First Amendment. He thinks that students are not allowed to pray in school, when in fact the ruling of a couple court cases in 1962 and 63 prohibited teachers from leading students in prayer or from teaching the Christian Bible in public schools. And this is both because the United States is and always was a secular nation in which Congress shall make no law even respecting an establishment of religion, and also because it would be a violation of the students' rights if they're Jewish or Muslim, Hindu, Sikh, or Native American, or whatever. Those students have a right not to be indoctrinated into Christianity or any other religion by their teachers. They shouldn't have to listen to it. Public school teachers are not there to impose their religion onto other people's kids. So it's not that students can't pray. They can. They can pray anywhere in any way they want to. It's only illegal for public school teachers to force their own religion onto their students and lead them in prayer. That's because we have freedom of religion, and too many Republicans hate that. Rick Gray doesn't understand that many of the pioneers and champions of evolutionary theory have been or are Christian. He doesn't understand that you can accept evolution and still be Christian. Instead, he thinks that if we teach evolution and we don't indoctrinate other people's kids into his phony baloney religion, then that's the same as teaching them that there is no God. But it's not the same thing at all. The leading textbook teaching evolution in public schools was written by a traditional Catholic. So no one is teaching the kids that there is no God. Unfortunately, one of the other senators was there to correct Mr. Gray about that.
I take umbrage with what the senator from LD21 said about that we teach that God doesn't exist, we meaning teachers. That is categorically false. We follow what the founding fathers said, which is the separation of church and state, and teachers respect that. I personally go to church. Today I don't generally have a cross on because I have deeply held religious beliefs. And a lot of teachers do. We are not out there teaching that there is no God. We are respecting what we are supposed to do.
Of course, she spoke up after Mr. Gray's embarrassingly ignorant, bigoted rant, in which he continued,
There are no absolutes. We live in a postmodern world, so whatever you think is right is right. And if somebody else has a different view, you're still right.
No, you're wrong. There are atheist philosophers who consider that morality is largely objective, because everyone knows that a particular action or choice is immoral or wrong if it somehow diminishes someone else's happiness, well-being, or health, or if it somehow causes unnecessary harm or suffering, or both. We all understand that, even if we make up excuses or evoke religion in an attempt to justify our commission of evil anyway. And Christians commit acts of evil often, even when they believe that their God is watching them. Because people are fallible and subject to their neuroses and biases, regardless what they do or don't believe about morality. That's why we make and enforce laws.
There are no absolutes.
There are few absolutes, but there are some. Like, for example, we know for absolutely certain that creationism is wrong, that the tale of Adam and Eve is just a metaphorical fable with a moral, but with not even a kernel of truth to it otherwise. Even evangelical Christians admit that, if they're trained in genetics. And we know that the Tower of Babel and the global flood of Noah's Ark never happened as described, and we know that absolutely, because we have all the evidence necessary to prove that that story is not just impossible, that it couldn't happen, but that even if it could have happened by some miracle, we still know for certain that it didn't happen. Now, some philosophers would say that you can't be absolutely sure that reality is even real, that you can't know if you're just a brain in a vat that was created with false memories last Thursday. But if that is the case, then even in that alternative reality, Noah's Ark never happened then either. So even if we can't know everything, we can still know that the Bible is wrong about a bunch of things that never really happened in any case. And we can be absolutely certain about that.
That we're animals.
It is an indisputable fact that we are animals, that we are multicellular eukaryotes with an internal digestive tract, that we have to ingest living cells in order to survive, so that our very configuration depends on death. Even the Bible admits that we are but beasts, and it says that the only reason why some, like Mr. Gray here, may not admit that is merely because of human vanity.
And we're just animals. It's survival of the fittest. But then we're shocked when they act that out. But we say, don't act that way.
Except that it's not survival of the fittest. Some economists of the 20th century may have believed in a kind of classism that could be described that way, but no human society allows the type of behavior that Senator Gray thinks is going on. And animals exhibit a concept of morality just like we do. And wild animals are less inclined to be as evil as people can be, being driven by our prejudice, bigotry, and whatever you imagine to be religious righteousness. In reality, our morality is a product of our evolution as a social species, where no man is an island. We all depend on society, which, society in turn depends on us to cohabitate productively. So those who are honorable and empathetic to the needs of others tend to be trusted and loved the most, and they procreate the most. While selfish deviants with underdeveloped prefrontal lobes or whatever other antisocial condition tend to be ostracized from society, either by being banished, imprisoned, or killed. Thus, it's simply a matter of population mechanics that we developed compassion for our family, friends, and fellows. Somehow, Senator Gray imagines that belief in God leads to morality, which is demonstrably false, and is not even supported by his religious doctrine, where it doesn't matter how evil you are, because every sin can be forgiven if you but believe, but if you don't believe, then it doesn't matter how good you are, because the only sin that will not be forgiven is the sin of disbelief. Thus, gullibility is the sole criteria of redemption, and morality is largely irrelevant to his belief system.
These kids, and it's usually been kids that are shooting kids in school, what have they been taught?
Some of them were taught white supremacy. Understand that studies show that those who reject evolution are more likely to be racist. And remember that the Ku Klux Klan are entirely composed of Christian creationists. In fact, most hate groups tend to be very religious. So you can't blame evolution for this, especially in a country that doesn't teach evolution very well, if at all. But if students were taught evolution correctly, then they would see themselves not as fallen sinners, but as a rising lineage of resourceful survivors, beings who are, as the Buddhists say, one with everything, connected to all living things, being a part of nature, not apart from it.
Friends, we have a state religion in the United States of America. Even though there's supposed to be separation of church and state, there is a state religion. It's human secularism, aka atheism.
Secular humanism is not a religion, and neither is atheism, which is not the same thing, even though both are typically characterized as a rejection of religion. And secularism is non-religious by definition. So Senator Gray is wrong, and he made this claim knowing that there is no document, no government seal, nor any other official statement from anyone ever declaring atheism as the state religion. So that what he just said is a lie, and he knows it. Because this idiot made this claim during a Senate floor session that began with and ended with a prayer to the Christian God.
I pray that for the glory of God and in the pursuit of his justice.
Look up the original video and you can see how it begins and ends. Senator Gray apparently believes that the truth doesn't matter, that the ends justify the means, so it's okay if he lies, if he says things he can't show to be true, or that we can show to be false. He thinks it's okay to lie if it evokes an emotional response in defense of his pig-ignorant, prejudiced, paranormal fantasy.
That's why when we look at these problems, we cancel out anything that has a spiritual connotation. And what do we do with just a humanistic basis? Well, guns kill, so we take guns away.
Not quite. And no one is trying to take your guns away. Republicans have, in the past, banned assault rifles. Ronald Reagan banned assault rifles in California when he saw that black people had them. And now some Democrats would like to do that nationwide. But that's probably not going to happen. And the solution is not going to be that simple, not as simple as Senator Gray is. There are ways to solve this problem, but Senator Gray is not interested in doing that or anything. Why did Arizona elect him? What he is unwittingly saying about spiritual connotations versus humanistic bias is that when faced with real-world problems, we look for real-world solutions rather than blaming evil spirits or magic. Some of us learned a lesson from the Salem witch trials, reasons why claims of the supernatural cannot be taken seriously by the courts or by government. But Senator Gray is apparently still in that 15th century mindset, still believing in devils and curses and that sort of thing.
There is a spiritual problem here.
No, there isn't, because there's no such thing as spirits. There is a cultural problem here. Senator Gray is part of that problem, and he is an example of it, of how we are going wrong.
We've got kids out there that are lost and empty. They have no value because all they've been taught is they're animals.
You mean as opposed to being taught that they were born filthy sinners who need to beg forgiveness just for existing, and that anyone who believes differently deserves to be killed and or tortured forever, not for their actions, but just over what or whether they believed? I'd rather understand reality than make-believe such a sick fantasy.
There are no absolutes.
Except that Senator Gray is absolutely wrong on every point he's tried to make so far.
You decide what's right and wrong.
Well, everyone knows that you're not supposed to violently attack or rob people without provocation. Even if you do it anyway, you still know that it's wrong. And that's why people make up excuses trying to justify their bad behavior. But some other moral issues are not so obvious and must be evaluated in a way that Senator Gray has apparently never done and will never do.
In the hometown that I came from, Omaha, there was a kid that shot a guy that was sleeping on a park bench. And when they asked him why he did that, he said, "I just wanted to find out what it was like to kill a person."
Objection? Relevance? I couldn't find the specific incident that Senator Gray was talking about, but I know that it is statistically more likely that the murderer would be a Christian than an atheist. Most of the terrorist attacks in the United States in the last decade or so at least have been committed by right-wing, Bible-believing conservative Christians.
I happened to have a customer who was talking to me about their frustrations of what's going on today.
Well, part of that is that we have highly politicized propaganda channels posing as news outlets that are using emotionally evocative and deliberately deceptive talking points to instill fear and outrage in their viewers, and to promote us versus them tribalism against the others, whether it be gays, Muslims, minorities, immigrants, or radical leftists, because you can never talk about leftists without saying the word radical in front of it, because you can't let people think that there are reasonable leftists or that there are radical right-wingers either. These so-called news shows are trying to polarize the country into a culture war, and maybe even a civil war. And at least a third of the nation have been raised as frightened, gullible sheep who foolishly buy into whatever they're told, no matter how impossible or absurd.
She happened to be a teacher. Interestingly, she happened to taught ethics. And I said, "Why? I don't know why we're so shocked. We teach our kids there is no God. We teach them that there are no absolutes, there's no right and wrong."
There's another lie. No one teaches kids that there's no right or wrong. It's just that social issues are rarely a black or white dichotomy. We need to consider not only intermediate shades of gray, but other nuance and extenuating circumstances amounting to a spectrum of color, with some concepts being much more in-depth and complex than Rick Gray can consider. And sometimes it's not a binary choice of extremes, but a bell curve where most people are more toward the middle and very few are at either extreme. Very few things are as binary as Rick Gray wants everything to be. Elected officials should understand that, but this guy doesn't. So he has no business being on the Senate floor.
We teach them that we're all animals.
Because we are. That's just an indisputable biological fact, and thus the truth of the matter.
It's the survival of the fittest. We can't expect them to not live that out.
Except that I've always understood evolution better than anyone I ever knew growing up, and yet I always knew that human societies do not subject people to natural selection. That would be inhumane according to our evolution. If only Senator Gray understood evolution as well as I did back in second grade, then he would know why everything he says here is so embarrassingly wrong.
There's a deeper core issue here. And when we lose our concept of God, we lose the sanctity of life. Regardless of your color, regardless of your economic situation, you have value. When that changes, you have no value. And that's the sad reality of why we're at the place we are.
Then why is it that states or countries with the highest religiosity also have the highest murder rates, while the most atheist countries are often the nicest places to live, not just for the rich, but for everyone of every alleged race or class? They're often not only more peaceful and prosperous, but more egalitarian. Could it be that Senator Gray is wrong about this too, like he's wrong about everything else he's said so far?
And we can put a Band-Aid and try and say, let's just solve this by covering this up, by take the guns away. Again, look at California. They've had mass shootings and they've got gun control. Look at Chicago, again, one of the premier cases, the number of deaths. And again, looking at little black children that are killed, and it doesn't make the headlines like Texas did. And Texas should make headlines. That's heartbreaking. I saw that picture today in the Wall Street Journal of that little girl crying and the father holding her. It was heartbreaking. And then to see that tweet by this journalist that said, we don't care. We care deeply. Deeply. We just don't see gun control as the solution. And I'm probably not going to change anybody's minds, but I need to put it out there. Because the fact that we don't support gun control as the solution to all of this does not mean our hearts don't break for these children that have to go through that and these parents that have to go through that. But I just want to say, if we don't solve the deeper issue, we are going to continue to see this and worse. Because until we come to the place to where we believe that man was made in the image of God, and each person, regardless of their level of economic value, their color of their skin, or anything else, or their physical capability, have intense, intrinsic value.
That would be humanism, not theism, certainly not Abrahamic theism, where the sacred fables say that God wiped out the Canaanites, Amalekites, Midianites, and so on, sometimes just to make room for his chosen people, because God is a racist who does not love everyone equally. And God refuses to allow people into the tabernacle if they're crippled or physically disfigured, or if they're a descendant of a sinner, because such people do not have intense intrinsic value in God's eyes the way humanism says they still do. So there's no reason to lie to sequestered students saying that man was made in the image of God. We know better than that. And we know better than to assert facts that are not facts, pretending to know what no one even can know the way religion always does. We shouldn't lie to the kids like that. And folks in Arizona should elect someone else to take over for Rick Gray in Senate District 21, because he's full of ignorance and prejudice, and y'all don't need any more of that. You need someone who understands things, because this guy believes in magical fantasies, and he would rather wish upon a star than actually do anything useful or helpful. And sadly, he's not the only religious idiot in the Arizona Senate, as there were 2 or 3 others saying things that were just as stupid, putting faith over family, and saying that God and guns both should be immune from any legislation of any kind, and that in fact, instead of less guns or more restrictions or regulations on guns, they said there should be more guns, and that teachers should have to carry guns. I saved some clips. Have a listen.
Well said to the senator who just spoke, and said most of everything that I had wanted to say. In particular, the religious aspect, the spiritual aspect of these issues that we are facing in our country. When we don't value life, when we celebrate abortion, when we don't acknowledge science when it comes to gender, when it comes to who you are and what you want to be and you can just do whatever, when we bastardize childhood, what do we expect? What do you expect to happen? When you say there is no God, that we rose from slime, in evolution, and that God doesn't exist, then you remove what God is. God is love. That's what God is supposed to be. And when you remove love, you replace it automatically with what? The opposite, hate. And you see events like this, hate. And hate manifests itself in the unstable, as we saw yesterday. The way to remedy hate is with love. And when you attack religion, when you attack people who profess a faith, when you ridicule them and you teach in schools that they're archaic or whatever, the message to these kids underlying is hate. And it's okay to hate. So I underscore what the senator was saying about that. And I also want to underscore what he was saying about gun-free zones. What stopped the shooting yesterday? Men, I don't know if there was any women, but men who went in who were armed and stopped the killing. It could have been so much worse. I see heads shaking like that's some kind of disgrace. But that is the cold reality. In Texas, we had a guy with a long rifle, high-powered rifle, killing people in a church. What stopped him from killing more? A man across the street with a similar caliber weapon interrupted his killing spree. It isn't the gun. It's the sickness. If you go and you look at England and in Great Britain, they have knifings. Why? Because the heart can grow sick and do bad things. The weapon isn't the problem. It's the problem of the heart. It's the absence of love which brings sickness. So please don't liken us to monsters, Miss Minority Leader. When you insinuate, what are we if we don't stand against these monsters, my interpretation of that is we must be monsters. That hurt. I resent being insinuated, that's my take, that I'm somehow a monster. And I don't stand here asking us to do nothing. I think the solution is we need to arm our schools. Plain and simple. End of the day, we need armed whoever at our schools, whether it's veterans who are volunteering, whether it's the police, whether it's arming the teachers. Someone needs to be able to stop a person who is sick and full of hate, regardless of their age. Someone needs to stop that. And I am just as tired of it as you are. I'm just as tired of it as you are. And so I think our priority should be funding the school security systems, whatever that might be. But I think step one, as we see what stops a shooter, is equal force from a good guy. So we need more good guys until we get the issues of the heart fixed, which I don't see any light at the end of the tunnel there. You know, my opinion is we need to turn to God.
Hello, are you kidding me? Teachers have been so attacked across the country this session, in this state, this session and last session. Oh my gosh, are you kidding? To arm a teacher, if there's any type of mistake, we've got right now bills that will allow parents to sue teachers over things that are taught. What is going to happen when there is some kind of a mistake, an accident that an armed teacher makes? What is going to happen? I mean, it's going to be like the death penalty or something. I mean, I just cannot even believe that that is on the table. The members across the aisle do not trust teachers to even teach content, and now you're suggesting you do trust them, though, to carry guns to school? I mean, give me a break. There are a lot of things that we could be doing, and it's not one thing. Could gun control mitigate it? Yeah. Is it going to solve it? No. Could other things that are coming, that are suggested from across the aisle, minus arming teachers, actually mitigate the situation? Probably. This isn't going to be solved by one, silver metaphorical bullet. But certainly, sensible gun control could contribute to the mitigation of this overwhelming tragedy. And I speak right now as both a teacher and both as someone who has lost a child. So I feel like I've got a double interest in this particular topic. But, I mean, schools, in my school, and I know all over my district, there are plenty of no place for hate type of both signs and the mentality that goes with it. We, as in schools, in our public schools, are welcoming everybody. There is no place for hate. Nowhere is there being taught something about hate or something about God not existing. That is for families to decide. It is not for teachers to decide. Hence the Founding Fathers implementing the separation of church and state.
At times, hearing very different opinions can really stretch me. When I hear others, I think, wow, how can they believe that? But I know that they do. I know that there are others that do as well. That's when we're in a country like ours and in a place like this, all those ideas, all those differences collide in a very sometimes messy and emotional floor of the Senate. But I get really, really discouraged, and I'm also going to say angry, when folks here on the floor, maybe not verbally on the floor, but maybe in the Twitter sphere, say really despicable things about their colleagues. And I'm going to call one out. The senator from District 29 just tweeted out, Senator Rick Gray's unhinged tirade on the Arizona Senate floor is a perfect example of how completely disconnected from reality the AZ Senate GOP is. Wow. I agree with the last word, wow. I looked up the word unhinged. What he was saying is that the senator from District 21 is mentally unbalanced and deranged. It is difficult, Madam President, to have healthy conversations with a person who is a colleague who is willing to say that kind of thing about their colleagues.
I don't believe that teaching God in the classroom is appropriate. We should be responsible for that as parents in our own home. That's our responsibility. So not only that, to make sure that our family has their spiritual alignment in place. One is your faith, second is your spouse, third is your children, and then everything else comes secondary or comes after that. And that's something that I was raised with. I don't say that from a point of self-righteousness, but that seems like that's what sets boundaries for families and then also for children. Since I've been here, I think everybody here, we tend to, as five-fingered beings, we have this God-given will. That's what we have.
Quite frankly, I'm extremely offended that these children have not even had their funeral services yet. And in less than 24 hours, it was immediately politicized by the president and the vice president. The names of these children were not even released to the public yet. And it was immediately politicized to go after the gun industry. I agree. There are some deeper issues that we need to address. It's not the object. I mean, we had a nut job mow down people in a parade with an SUV. We don't attack the SUV. This was pure evil that happened yesterday. And I'm really offended that it became political right off the bat. And even on this floor, one member calling another member unhinged. This has to stop. And I accept the invitation from Senator Hitafli. I accept that invitation. Let's sit at the table. Let's figure out a cause root of this evil. Where was this man's father, for God's sakes? He shoots his grandmother. Where is his parents? I lived in Texas for 5 years. I understand the culture. There's guns everywhere. But that's not the issue. The issue is evil. Where are these people's parents? The family breakdown is enormous. Our prisons are filled with young men who never had a father figure. Let's address that. Unwedded mothers, deadbeat dads. This shame is on their forehead.
I'm not going to get up and start raising my voice and pointing at people and doing whatever. It doesn't accomplish anything. But I will say that making this political or accusing people of making this political, we signed up for that. That's where we sit. That's where we stand. If it's not political and if we're not going to pass any bills, what the hell are we doing here? We change bills every year. And here we are, want to finger point and say what's good, what's right, what's wrong. We do that every day in committee, on the floor. But one damn thing I can't change is saying goodbye to my wife that's a teacher this morning after what happened yesterday. And dropping off my 3 kids at school because it's her last day at school, and one of my daughters is a 4th grader. The other one's a 6th, and the other one's a 7th. That I can't change. Being scared is all hell because I had to say goodbye to them and kiss them knowing that they're going to the damn same place that people died yesterday. a teacher, my wife, students, my children. The hell with about this being political. It is, because we make the laws. And yes, you're right, Senators Totley and others. Yeah, we should be working together. But unfortunately, in this place that we all stand, that doesn't happen. So we can finger point at leadership, we can finger point at that side, this side, whatever you guys want, whatever anyone wants. And we can talk about guns and we can talk about everything else. But something has to be done. We need to do something. Stop talking about it.
This is just another example of a trend I've noticed after years of political activism. You want to make things better? Do exactly the opposite of whatever the Republicans are doing. Guns should require background checks, licensing, and training, just like cars. There should be some restrictions and regulations, and Arizona already has a law that you can lose your guns over domestic violence or criminality. That, I think, should be nationwide. You want to win the war on drugs? Give up. Decriminalize them, regulate them, and reap the revenue. Every state that has done that has made bank while also reducing crime and even usage of teens using drugs. And what will happen to the Mexican cartels when they have no customers anymore? You want to improve the economy? Make sure billionaires and corporations pay taxes, instead of leaving that to the shrinking middle class through the failed system of Reaganomics. You want to improve the environment? Reinstate federal restrictions and regulations that the GOP took away during the Trump administration. You want to preserve and protect human rights and improve education too? Republicans are actively trying to undermine all of that because they have goals opposite yours and they are working against you. So vote them out of office.